Listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Robert Geddes is my name from the AIC, here with today's webinar on value curves, the value of value curves. So this webinar is supported by the Queensland Government as a series of webinars that we're conducting, that we've put together here at AIC, and that we're putting out over the airwaves. So welcome everybody. For those who are new to AIC, or the AIC is new to them, we're a business support organisation that was established to give assistance to business across Australia, particularly in the areas of innovation, collaboration and commercialisation. We've been around for 10 years. We're now actually part of an organisation called Commercialisation that's been around for 20 years that looks very much at efficiencies of processes. And and as I mentioned, this webinar series is supported by Queensland Government, particularly the Department of Science, Information Technology, Innovation and the Arts. There's a number of webinars, so I'm pleased to help you along, have you along on this one. So this one's all about value curves, and value curves is just a tool, but it's actually all about strategy. Actually, another phrase, definition of this value curves tool is actually a strategy canvas. So it's about strategy for the business. But I actually prefer the term value curves because it actually puts it in a customer's frame, in the customer's viewpoint. And value curves help a business to visualise how it delivers customer value. It also helps compare different business options. So you can look at different options and see which ones you might like to progress with. It helps you also understand why some businesses create more value for customers. So you can look at the end result of your work with the value curves and see the difference, see where the gaps are, see where changes might be appropriate to deliver better value for customers. And it also enables you to create new and innovative business models. So it's a tool to be able to innovate your business. So it's actually very, very clever, very simple, and powerful little tool in business. In the previous webinar, we looked at deep customer insights, having a look at what customers are thinking in your business. And we recommended out of that you develop a customer-centric business culture, that your business got into the mind of the customer to help you understand what value means in their mind and to refine your value proposition so that you can better meet a customer's needs. We also recommended that it's important to have feedback from the customer. Feedback is very important, but insights are vital. That's going even further. Not just getting what the customer tells you, but actually thoroughly understanding the customer, seeking empathy and deep understanding of what motivates their behaviour, what makes them do the things they do, what makes them buy from you or buy from your competitors, understanding what's behind that so that you can modify your business to suit. And deep customer insights, well, there's a few simple tools and effective tools to capture deep customer insights and then to turn that back into a strategy for your business. So they were the recommendations, a recap on the previous webinar, and we'll try and put that into practice. The key thing out of that was that you should become customer-centric, that you should actually turn your thinking away from you to them, away from being organisation-centric and looking at how can you sell to customers, how can we get to the biggest section of the market, what relationships do we want to have with them. Thinking from your side, turn that around to thinking from the customer side. Become customer-centric in your business. Try to understand what needs and jobs the customer has to get done, what issues they have, what problems, what pains they have, and what aspirations they have that you might be able to respond to and solve. How do your customers prefer to be addressed? What sorts of communications and channels to market and delivery modes are they actually wanting and seeking and would be convenient for them rather than what would be convenient for you. So shifting from you to them, shift from seller language, which is all about push, how you want to push out into the marketplace, to buyer language, which is looking at things in their language, employ words that the customers actually use in looking for solutions to their problems. So we strongly recommending that you shift your focus to become customer-centric. And one way that, that we suggested that is to use a little tool called this customer empathy map. And then here on the right-hand side of the screen is a typical customer for this particular business. And you might have a number of different customer segments that you can categorize in the way that they behave. It might not be normal customer segments in old school ways, but what you're looking at is consistent behavior from customers. And for each of those segments of your market, have put together a customer empathy map. Understand what is it that in their daily lives that they're seeing. What sorts of advertisements, what sorts of other behavior, what sorts of other products, what sorts of other services are they seeing in their daily behavior and in their other aspects of their life. What are they thinking and feeling? What are their thoughts? How do they feel about what they're being offered? Are they angry about being kept in a queue? What are their thoughts and feelings? What are they seeing and hearing? What's on the radio and television? What are their friends saying? What does the boss say to them? What do their influencers say, the people that they look up to in that marketplace? And then what does that particular person, he or she, say or do? What's their attitude in public? What's their outward appearance, their behavior towards others? Get a thorough understanding. Be empathetic with your customer in each customer segment. Out of that, you can start to understand what are their pains and gains? What are their deepest fears and frustrations and obstacles? What cheeses them off in their life? And what are their wants and needs? What are their measures of success? What are they looking for? What do they desire in their lives? If you can get an understanding, be empathetic with your customer, you can better develop a business that will actually satisfy those needs and enable them to buy from you. What is it that they actually value and what would they actually pay for? So having that understanding of a customer is vital, and do that for every customer segment. One of our successful businesses here in Queensland, DeBella Coffee, has done very, very well. And Philip, who started the whole company and is still in charge today, is very much concerned with who doesn't buy from him as well. So not only your customer segments are the people who do buy from you at the moment, but the customers that don't buy from you. There's one tier, which are those customers that go to your opposition and buy from the opposition. Well, why do they do that? There's another tier, a third tier of non-customers that are farthest from the market. These are people who have never even thought of buying from you. Why haven't we even reached them? Why don't they think of coming to us? Why haven't they looked us up on the internet? Why haven't they searched us on Google? Getting inside the minds of the non-customers is vital as well. So being empathetic there. Once you have that understanding, you can start to redesign your business around the customer, around the target market. Another tool that we introduced in the last webinar was this value proposition canvas. And it actually has on the right-hand side here a little diagram which, with questions in it, which helps capture a whole range of different responses to this empathy around the customer. So this little guy here is our customer segment on the right-hand side of our business model canvas. That's another tool. Look up strategizer.com. You'll start to read some of the information about that business model canvas if that's new to you today. So this is all about understanding the customer. And then over here, it's actually understanding the product or service that you're offering and how that meets the customer's needs. If you understand the customer well, you can design the product or service to meet their needs very, very well. Understand what the pain relievers are, relieving their pain. understanding what the gain creators are that you offer to give them the gain that they're seeking, and develop the detail, the specific details of your product or service over here. And so with that, this is your product or service that you've decided now actually satisfies the needs of the customer. And here's our little customer on the right-hand side here. And he's looking to buy. And in the marketplace, there's not just your product out in the marketplace, there's a whole range of other things that he could spend his money on. So understanding what he's thinking in his buying decision is actually a key part of designing your business, designing your value proposition around the customer. Having that empathy, understanding what the customer needs, what the customer wants. One way that we can graphically show this and how we actually compete with all of these other offerings out in the marketplace and whether we stand out, whether we actually satisfy their needs better than the others in the marketplace, is this tool called value curves. It's actually quite a simple little chart. You can do it just on a blank piece of paper. You don't need any magic software or apps or anything like that. And it's just two axes. Across the bottom, we've actually got your identified customer needs and desires. These are the things that you found out from empathizing with the customer, finding out what are the things that that customer is looking for in buying your product or service, in consuming your product, in engaging your service. What are the decision points? What are the things they're looking for in that marketplace? Why will they buy one product over another? Because it satisfies these customer needs better in their mind. And on the vertical axis here, we've just got whether we do this relatively high or relatively lowly. So, for example, for competitor A out in the marketplace, we've got a competitor there. He satisfies this need pretty lowly. He's not very good at satisfying this first need. The next one, he does reasonably well. The next one, superb. He's actually very good at item number 3, etc. And you can map out how the company performs against each of the customer needs and desires and map that out. This is called a value curve. You do that for competitor A. You can also do it for competitor B and map out how they satisfy it. And you can look at competitor C or map yourself down on that same chart as well and look at how each company satisfies those particular needs. Now here, there's not a lot of difference between those, and what we're actually looking for in customer value map is difference. We're looking for the gaps. That's where we can promote our point of difference. But in here, it's a very crowded sort of a map, and that's not very good at all. That's actually called the red ocean. There's a book called the blue ocean theory, and I'll get to that in a moment, that termed this as the red ocean. Where there's a lot of competition like this and there's not much gap between them, it's very difficult to differentiate between the offerings in the marketplace. That's a red ocean. That's commodity. You'll end up fighting on price because there's no difference in terms of the values of the products or services being offered. So basically you get down to a fight on price if they're all Me Too products. So in that sort of a red ocean strategy, what you're really looking for is to move out of that, somehow get into what they term a blue ocean and create your own uncontested market space. Make competitors irrelevant. In the red ocean, competitors are all over the place. There's blood in the water. That's why it's the red ocean. But what we're looking for is a nice clean blue ocean where there's no competitors and you own it, an uncontested market space, and where competitors are irrelevant. And we can use the value curves tool to do this. So I mentioned the Blue Ocean Strategy book, and here it is on the left-hand side here. And it's all about creating this uncontested market space and making competitors irrelevant. We've got these two columns here. We've got the red ocean and we've got the blue ocean. The red ocean is all about competition. People are competing to exist, and they're trying to beat the competition. It's all about price, and they're exploiting the existing demand out there as much as they can, trying to get market share and fight each other off and put better offers into the marketplace, but it's a very contested space. And they make a value cost trade-off by actually reducing the cost in most cases and often taking value out of it because they have to reduce the cost. And so it's a downward spiral. So it's a very defensive, competitive position and a place where a lot of companies are. What you should be seeking and how you can benefit from using this value curve tool, the strategy canvas, is to actually create uncontested market space. Make the competition irrelevant. Create and capture new demand, new markets that you're not fighting over a small pie. You're actually increasing the size of the pie or baking a whole new pie. And we're breaking that value cost trade-off in that we can actually start to charge higher prices because we now have greater value, get greater margins because we've got greater value and less competition. So how do we do that? That sounds like a very idealistic world. Well, for an example, one value curve that I'd like to put forward to show that reasonably clearly is the banking industry. And for a long while we had a very traditional banking industry, the bricks and mortar banks. They were very good with security of information. You felt very confident that your information and your money was actually safe with them. They're actually starting to develop online apps and phone services and things like that, but they're not very good at that. That's only new into their service range. And services specifically for me, well, you're just one of 10,000 people that we're offering this to. We're not going to change it for you. And we're big, we're a bank. We're not going to change for you. They've certainly got history and reputation. They've been around since Federation, and the brand is very, very important, and the stability in the marketplace, etc., is very important. They've got local showrooms, being the branches of the bank. They've got a range of services. They've got mortgages and loans for banks and all sorts of different products that they can offer as well. And they'll bundle with other products as well, with insurance and all sorts of different things like that. And their price, though, is reasonably high. They'll take decent fees out of what you're giving them because they can, and they offer all these wonderful things. So they've had this nice, safe area for a long time, and it's been a bit of a, well, if not a monopoly, then a duopoly, or they all play the same game. Relatively speaking, interest rates go up for one and they go up for all. Step forwards into the 21st century and have an online offering. And this was the ING offering by comparison. And they're offering security of information and security of your money. That's a given. If you don't have that, you're not in the race. They're very good at online apps and phone services. That's where they've come into the marketplace. That's what they're good at. Services specifically for me, yes, they'll customize quite a range of different things, and you can do the customizing yourself. History and reputation, well, they're getting there. They've been around for a while, and they're certainly big in Europe, and they're getting bigger here, and they're increasing this. They're moving this point up. Do they have a branch or local office? No, they don't. Do they have a range of services? Very, very little. This is what we offer. It's our limited menu. Do we bundle with other products? No, we offer what we offer, but we can offer a low price because we don't have the costs associated with all of these things, and we don't have the huge number of staff and everything associated with running the bricks and mortar office. So you can see there with the two value curves with these two different offerings, there's actually gaps here. There's gaps here. And that's where you can see the point of difference, and that's where you can advertise where you are certainly different and where you might actually target different people with different needs because of your different offering. So there on that one canvas, you can see a different approach to business. So what they've done is actually created an uncontested market space by offering something completely different. They haven't followed the same old line, the same old business model that the previous historical banks did. So they've taken off the blinkers, and so they've made the traditional competitors irrelevant in their online space, and they're playing catch up now. Another industry is the watch industry. This was actually quite a good example. Right back in the 50s, 60s, what have you, there were luxury timepieces, and they had a high price. Their time was accurate. The clear reading, apart from say the jewels on the things, you could actually read the time very, very clearly. No winding required. Well, in some of the top end models you did have to wind, but yes, they were bringing in all sorts of things. There's a couple of designs, so there was a bit of choice. Not terrific at that. And they had an extra feature on some of them. They actually introduced the date feature in the top end luxury timepieces. So that was the value curve for the luxury end of the market. And along came the budget timepieces as well. Not everybody could afford the high price watch. So at a more moderate price, they're not as wonderful a timepiece as the high end timepiece. Quite good, clear reading faces. No winding required. They actually brought in new technology so they could actually compete in that space, and it was some years later as well. They offered design choice in a few different styles as well. They were cheaper to manufacture, and so they could come up with different variations. But they didn't, in the early stages, in order to offer the moderate price, they didn't have the extra features. So there's two different curves for two different analog watches, the old Swiss watch. And then along came the digital watches, and they offered a completely different, they changed the market, and in fact they offered extra features and made the competition irrelevant to some extent. They came in with cheaper price. The time was moderately accurate and it was improving because of the technology. Clear reading, they had digital displays, but not very good at night at that stage. But later on they came up with lights and things. No winding required. The battery technology, new technology was making that better. They had greater choices because they could tool up and provide different cases around the same internal mechanisms. And they had this extra date feature was part of everything. They then also added additional features such as a stopwatch and in some cases a calculator or what have you. So they offered a different value to a different section of the market and were able to compete on price and also on features. That's very much Blue Ocean strategy. And so the Swiss watch industry was suffering badly from the Japanese watch industry in the digital age. And so their response was actually to bring in another brand of Swiss watch called Swatch. Swatch actually stands for second watch as well. It talks about their whole philosophy. They came in with a price that was higher than the digital watches to make it a little bit more prestige. They're actually 50 euros when they were first introduced in 1982 or 3. Accurate time, it was less accurate than the old Swiss watches, but they actually, because they reduced the parts from 90 down to 60, but they were getting better and better. Clear reading, that wasn't such an issue, but it told the time, and they were getting better again with the technology. They used the same battery technology as the digital watches, etc., so they were able to get no winding, and that was made it nice and easy. Choice of styles, yes, they definitely offered choice of styles. That's where they were competing, where they were good. But they added the extra date feature, no. The extra stopwatch feature, no. And calculator, no. They didn't have any of those. They dropped those, so they weren't competing head-on with digital watches in that space. What they decided to do was add an extra thing that the others didn't have, which was fun style options. So different fashion options, color, pattern, design. And they were extremely good at that. They concentrated on that. They made that their marketing push. And so they differentiated themselves strongly in that area. So very good in this area and slightly higher price in this. So they weren't competing. They weren't driving the price down. They're actually starting to drive the price back up by eliminating some things and adding extra, which didn't cost a lot. And that worked particularly well in the Swiss industry, in the watch industry. And so they were able to take over, and to the extent that in Italy around that time, people had about 7 watches of all different styles, depending on what they wanted to wear at the time, etc. So they made it a fashion item rather than simply a timekeeping item. They changed the paradigm of the industry. So the Swatch, and it really revolutionised things, and you can see that in so many different ways in so many different industries when you look back over it, people offering different things, where the industry has changed. Another industry that was like the banking industry, like the watch industry, that was rooted in tradition was the circus, the greatest show on earth. That had a business model that had been going on for a long time, and trying to compete in that space was actually difficult. There were major players such as Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, who had driven down to a moderately low ticket price because families and kids were the target. They had to have star performers, they had to have animals and multi-show arenas, fun and humour with their clowns, etc., thrills and danger with the high wire act, and a unique venue with the tent. And so that was their value curve, and smaller competing circuses just simply followed the same business model. They didn't do it as well, so they offered a lower ticket price. They didn't have as many star performers, they didn't have as many animals, it was just a dog and a pony. They had one arena, not multi-arenas. Fun and humour, they could do that reasonably easily with the clowns. The thrills and danger, well, they didn't have the star performers, so the thrills and danger weren't as exciting. And the venue was a smaller tent, but much the same. So the competitors just followed the same business model. So if you're in that space, trying to compete there is actually very difficult. So if you wanted to reinvent the circus and come into it in a different way, you have to do something different rather than copy the same old and drive the price down. Cutting services and cutting value, etc., is just making it worse. It's not looking after the customer at all. So fast forward and have a look at another group called Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil operated out of tents as well, but they spoke of them as a chapeau, spoke of them in French, and made them quite exciting. They had a higher ticket price. They were going for the high ticket price, so they were actually not aiming at children, but they were actually aiming at the theatre market. They were aiming at couples that would spend a large amount of money for an evening's entertainment. The star performers, no, they got rid of the named performers. They had very clever performers, but they could interchange acrobats. People who were the lead acrobat tonight might be on holiday tomorrow and have another lead acrobat. So they weren't trading off the name. They got rid of the animals because animals were a problem with animal rights movements and actually having to feed and have train animals, and they're very difficult to control in a show. They had a single arena, not a multi-arena, so they're actually eliminating some things that were in the circus industry. They added, certainly included fun and humour. That was an important part of their DNA. Thrills and danger, certainly some thrills and not a lot of danger because they're star performers, although there have been some deaths. But they wound it back a little bit from the high trapeze with no net. And the unique venue, they actually made it a bit better. But they couldn't just take the higher price by getting rid of some of the things and having some things less. They had to add to it. So what they did is they added some extra dimensions on the identified customer needs and desires, dimensions taken out of the theatre, the opera movement. So they added a theme, they added artistic music and dance, and they added refined watching enjoyment. So you weren't amongst the sawdust and animal droppings. It was actually a lot more refined. So they added additional features to differentiate themselves from the other competition for dollars in that marketplace. So they reinvented the circus. Can you reinvent your industry? they also had multiple different productions, so they could keep coming back year after year with a different production and capture the same audience because their brand reputation was good. And those productions circle the world and are in many places around the world. So Cirque du Soleil certainly do it very, very well. Another company that's done it particularly well is Yellowtail Wines, Casella Wines out of Australia, decided to take on the US market with Australian wine because it was very contested over here. But in the US market, wines was only a very small part of the drinking, the drinking dollar in the USA. And so in the 1990s, they decided to think outside the box to tackle the US market. And the wine market in the US was quite saturated. It was full of very high-priced wines, and only wines were only consumed at important occasions. So Yellowtail decided to take on that market, but it's now in about 50 countries around the world because of the model it took on. It changed the way that wines were marketed and viewed. So in just October last year, they bottled their 1 billionth bottle, which is around 10 billion glasses of Yellowtail wine. It's one of the biggest manufacturers of wine in Australia, and it's a major importer into the United States and Canada, 50 different countries around the world. So their value curve, how did they go about this? In the States, as I mentioned, there were premium wines, had high price. They used wine terminology in a very using jargon a lot, wine jargon, and they used very overt marketing, such as glossy magazines and all those sorts of things, spending a lot of money on marketing to create the prestige value. Aging quality, vineyard prestige was all important to them. Wine complexity and the wine range. This is how they sold it. This is how they commanded their high prices. There's also budget wines in the States at that same stage, which had a lesser range. It had less wine complexity. The vineyard prestige was not so important, lesser known vineyards. The aging quality less important. They used some marketing that was visible to try to sell and compete. They still use the same sort of terminology because wine was actually, they're trying to compete with the premium wines. So they were falling in the trap of using the same terminology. And they offered a lower price, trying to capture this market. And along comes Yellowtail. They decided that they wanted to command a reasonably moderate price, more than the cheap or budget wines. And they wanted to get rid of the wine terminology. And it's just wine. It's getting rid of all of the particular varietal names and all of the issues around being a snooty wine lover. They didn't use overt marketing. They used guerrilla marketing and used agents and word of mouth and all sorts of things of that nature below the line, so they didn't have to pay for it. Aging quality wasn't promoted at all. Vineyard prestige, well, it's wine from Australia, and they make good wines, don't they? Wine complexity was fair to moderate, and wine range, yeah, they actually decided to go in with a small range, particularly into a new market on the other side of the world. So here we have trying to offer a higher price, but lower features, competing against these budget wines. Well, on that curve, you wouldn't be able to compete against the opposition whatsoever. So they decided actually to go in and add things to make it different. They decided that, in fact, they weren't competing against wine drinkers, that wine drinkers might come across. What they were trying to do was capture the rest of the alcohol market, the beer drinkers and the spirits drinkers. And they actually didn't want a lot of the things that wine drinkers thought were important. What they wanted was something that was easy to drink, easy to choose, and had a bit of fun and maybe a bit of adventure associated with it as well. So they went high in those areas, making it a fun drink. And so Yellowtail just took over the marketplace as a new, fresh offering that wasn't that cut down on the issues of having to know what you're talking about, with which wine goes with which food, and it's only for important occasions. You can drink this anytime, anywhere. So they competed in that area, and in fact, as we've seen, 10 billion bottles. So it sells there's 500,000 cases sold annually of Yellowtail in the USA. So they've done particularly well. In another market, in the botanical skincare, pharmaceuticals skincare sort of a market, Aesop is an Australian brand that have tackled this market and are actually growing very well. And they've taken on the major players. So in their market, there was the cosmetics industry here in the orange, who were charging a high price. Packaging and advertising was very important to them. High-tech cosmetics science was very important to them, and a glamorous image. That's the cosmetics industry to a T. Natural ingredients? No, they weren't very good at that. Some of their products did, but many of them didn't. So this is where they were competing. They were high price, high end. Sometime later, the Body Shop out of the UK came in, offering products at a low price. Weren't very worried about packaging and advertising, etc. In fact, you could repack your own. The high-tech cosmetic science was taken out of it. It was not so scientific anymore. These were just creams and lotions that were effectively made in a commercial kitchen. A glamorous image. They wanted to portray an image, but it was nowhere the same as the cosmetics industry. But they went in high with natural ingredients and representation of healthy living. That's where they competed. And this was the background that Aesop wanted to tackle. Do they compete head-on against one of those, or do they create their own space? They looked at creating their own space. They wanted a higher price than Body Shop. They did it with cheaper-looking packaging and less advertising. They went in high with the science, but the science was on natural ingredients. The glamorous image, they played that down. They actually made an effort to drop that glamorous image so that it was actually more appealing to the average person rather than the person interested in glamour. Natural ingredients were high and representation of healthy living was high. But again, there's not a lot of difference there. So they decided to add transparency. So using the internet in particular, they've added a lot of transparency into what they offer, how they've offered it, and their conversation with their marketplace is very large. So they've added this extra transparency, and the others are having to pull across into that space as well. So their competition is here. The gap here in science, so theirs is very much more scientifically backed, using natural ingredients and with a healthy representation of living, and they're transparent about it all. They talk about it all, and that enables them to command a slightly higher price. So you can see how the value curves can offer different ways of looking at your industry. If you've got questions all the way along the line here, please certainly type them into your text panel, and we'll look at them and I'll address them at the end. Another industry to look at was Quicken. You don't have to necessarily compete by adding features. You can compete by looking at what your true competitors are, and that can phrase your marketing. Quicken being software for business management software and accounting software. So Quicken was in a marketplace where there's lots of other personal finance software. High price, difficult to use, lots of features, quite fast and quite accurate, which you would hope perhaps even more accurate than the dot there. They compared themselves at Quicken to the pencil. An alternative was to not spend on software at all. The alternative was to actually pick up the pencil and a piece of paper. The alternative was to pick up an Excel spreadsheet and work with Excel to do your accounts. Cheap price because it's available, Ease of use, not very many features. It writes at one end and perhaps even erases at the other. Speed is quite good, particularly if you know your sums. And accuracy, well, maybe you need to be a bit careful with the pencil. So they looked at that as their competitive frame and how might they map their way through in competing against that. So they wanted a higher price than the pencil, but they wanted the same ease of use as the pencil. They wanted it to be so easy to use. That was their desire from the outset. They offered few features, great speed, great accuracy, and they sold it on that. No extra features over here. They actually competed head-on, but they could command a higher price by the ease of use, speed and accuracy, and they got that by dropping the features. They made it easier to use, a better user interface, simpler to use, and appeal more to the masses rather than the trained accountants. Another thing I'd like to make you aware of is that you can do the value curve of the whole business, but in fact, and for each customer segment that you operate with, but within each customer segment, there are actually three classes of buyers. There are those who actually pay the money and actually purchase the goods, but then potentially there are people who are users that might not be the same people that bought it. And there's also influencers out there as well, those who influence the decision, who may not be users and may not be purchasers. So have a look at the different needs and aspirations of each of these segments, each of these classes of buyers in each of your target segments as well. That might give you some insights into how to create a new value curve. Just for example here, a client came up with this as a persona for one of their target segments in buying marine equipment. This was the ideal customer and very much represented their major customer segment where most of their money came from. And old Ben here was their target. But how to sell to Ben was a difficult task. He wasn't actually buying as quickly as he ought to. But then they realized that in fact, while Ben might be the purchaser and the user, that there's in fact an influencer behind here. Ben has a family. Ben has a young child and a wife. And they decided very quickly that the needs and aspirations and desires and wants and pain points and issues were different between Ben and his wife. So all of a sudden they started looking at what the issues were behind the influencer making a decision to buy, to influence the decision to buy, and decided that their marketing should actually appeal to his wife. That's made quite a difference. So when you're innovating your customer value, have a look at how you can do the curves based on your different target segments, and then also within those target segments, the user, purchaser, and influencer. And look at what you can increase, what you can reduce, what you can create, and what you can eliminate on that value curve to innovate your value curve to be able to compete in the marketplace. Think of it as basically having your own mixing desk or graphic equalizer with the customer needs, and you can dial up these at any stage. Change the settings and change it, try it. See what a business would look like if it had this different variation of customer needs, and try to add different sliders as well when you understand the user requirements. Competitive strategy, according to Doug Hall out of the Eureka Institute in the USA, actually requires is improved, your success is improved by the addition of three things. In this case, they did some research and found that if your product offering has a high dramatic difference to your competitors, you got 53% better chance of success. So dramatic difference to your competitors is important. Another influencer was overt benefit. If you've got an obvious, overt benefit that you're marketing, your chance of success is 38% better than your competitors. So overt benefit is important as well as dramatic difference. And having a reason to believe as to why you've created the company the way that you have, that you are the sort of company that you're portraying yourself to be. A reason to believe, having a high reason to believe, is frightfully important as well. So your mission should be to create a business that is as close as possible to a monopoly, with a demonstrated dramatic difference, featuring an overt benefit and a clear reason to believe. Create your own uncontested market space and make your competitors irrelevant. And the value curves tool is very important for that. Another little exercise I'd get you to do as well is, on paper, open up a competitor to yourself. How would you compete with you in the marketplace? This actually gives you tremendous insights into where your gaps are and where your failings are in the marketplace. You'll find it's quite easy to compete with yourself in the market. And with all of that, once you've done your value curves, take the Blue Ocean test on your curves. The authors of Blue Ocean Strategy actually came up with these 3 basic characteristics for an effective strategy: focus, divergence, and tagline. Focus. You'll notice that most of the successful value curves weren't all high on every dimension. They didn't meet customer requirements in every single dimension, because that actually costs money to do that, and they can potentially go out of business. They actually chose which areas they wanted to focus on, and they were strong on that. They were strong on fun and fashion, or they were strong on transparency and natural materials, etc. They chose an area to focus on. They diverged from the norm. They differentiated the organisation from its competition by having a gap in your value curve, something different, a difference, a divergence in your curves. And typically they captured that with a successful tagline, which actually is a very sticky, pithy, memorable tagline. So how do you measure up to the Blue Ocean test? That's about it for now for this webinar. There's a lot more material I can cover. I'd be interested to know if you've got questions, if you can type through in your question panel some of the questions that you might have, and we can go through those now for a short period of time. So, looking here, we have a question from Rebecca Vanderwalt. For a company to create its own market space, should innovators, entrepreneurs, and visionaries be on the board? Do you agree? Well, yes, that would be wonderful, but I think every business person can be an innovator, can be an entrepreneur, can be a visionary. Even people who are relatively staid and conservative in their approach, or who may have been in an industry for a long time, if you can actually do things such as get them to compete with themselves, put them through the situation of mapping out what the competitors do, try to actually go and look at get some empathy with the customers as well. If they start going back through these processes, it's relatively easy, particularly if they're from that industry, to actually innovate, to find spaces that haven't yet been covered. Although I'm always a good advocate, a strong advocate of having somebody from outside your business be part of the panel. Have a customer panel, have a customer board, review board that you consult, and that you have a key user, for example, a major customer that you bring into brainstorming sessions, or just have a lunch and have a discussion at some stage. have somebody from outside, have a creative person such as your web designer, graphic designer, or whatever it might be, come into your meetings and talk about these things. Get a creative, innovative spark as well. But using these tools, you can actually map out quite clearly what this current situation is, and then see a gap and potential opportunities to be able to innovate. So that's difficult, but I think creativity is actually in everybody if they use the tools. Another question here as well, can I use the value curve to compare my different products? Absolutely. If you are focused on a particular market segment and their needs, and you have a number of different products in that space, map out your different products compared to one another. It might tell you that some of your products are actually not competitive. It may tell you that you've actually got a good range of products as well that satisfy different needs. So yes, you can map out different products. If they're completely different, approaching different target segments, then they shouldn't be on the same map. They should be on their own map. A question here from Dwight Walker. Why do software programs have to be dumbed down to get mass appeal? Well, they don't necessarily have to be dumbed down, but it's all about user interface, and it depends. Many people don't want to go through extensive training to understand complicated user interface. So for software to get to the masses, usually it works better if it's a simpler interface, but actually potentially more clever. From my design background, the adage is really to put the things in front of the user that the user needs, and removal of the things that the user actually doesn't need, and take that away from them, or put it in the back, or somewhere where it's accessible at a later stage, so that you're not confronted with a remote control that has 153 buttons. You've got a remote control which has 12 buttons, but then that accesses other buttons later on as you need them contextually. So that's an approach there. One thing I wanted to mention just while we're here is the next webinar that we've got coming through. We have a third in this particular series of webinars coming along on Thursday the 3rd of April, same time at 12:30, funding new product development. So that's all about how does your company fund new products. So it's all very good to come up with a value curve and create ideas for new products to get out in the marketplace, but how do you initiate, how do you fund those? And there's a few different approaches apart from putting your hand in your own back pocket and just paying it out of cash. There's other approaches, and you may need a little bit more money than that. One question that I got at a recent workshop was from people wanting to be very more quantitative with value curves and actually put numbers to those. If people are strong about being very accurate and putting numerical ratings on particular customer requirements, etc., there is another tool called the House of Quality, or quality function deployment is the area of thinking that it comes out of. This is very much more complex, like our complex software, but this it gets into it very, very deeply. Automotive manufacturers, for example, use quality function deployment and the House of Quality to do things like here, look at how a car door should be designed, etc. And they put numerical ratings on these sorts of things and quantify that and check that with market research, etc. So if you're very much more analytical and quantitative, then that's the approach. But for most people, for most businesses, value curves are good. You can actually put on this left-hand side here, you can actually put a scale, you can actually rank it, but of course every single one of these will have a different rating system because they're a different requirement, a different customer need, different desire that isn't necessarily measured numerically. But you can build that in. So that's quite a bit of talking from me today. We're certainly we've gone over the listed time. Thank you very much for listening in, and we're very excited to present these webinars. And again, I'd like to acknowledge the Queensland Government for their assistance in making this available. So we will be sending around an email tomorrow seeking your feedback, so I'd be very much interested in your feedback, and also we'll provide you with a link to the slides so that you can look through those in your leisure. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll be signing off. Thank you.
Muted.